would do a kind of a list, which is a little bit different. This is going to be a top 5 of movies that have some type of emotional resonance for me. And, you know, to be honest with you, I can't really say I could do a top 10 because I really don't feel there is that many films that have got a kind of a big emotional resonance for me. And even a top 5 was kind of difficult to be. One of them, I got to be honest with you, I don't know if really would count, but I'm going to put it in there just to make 5. Now, what I would say is this is somewhat of a personal list. So this is almost a kind of a vlog type movie in some ways, because I'm going to be talking about my feelings and my emotions. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not great at that stuff. I don't really kind of like talk about my feelings and all that kind of stuff. But I thought it would be an interesting idea talking about, you know, top lists and all of that. So I'm going to go through it, and they're in no particular order as such, but my number 1 film here, I will say, is the one film out of all of the ones on this that gives you the kind of, that genuinely makes me feel somewhat emotive. But I will go off with the one I think is a little bit of a cheat, because I don't know if it really counts as such, and that's going to be Evil Dead 2. Now, a lot of these movies on this list are partially because the films remind me of the world around me at that time. So Evil Dead 2, I watched when I was about 18, and I was with my first girlfriend, you know, of my life. And I just remember that kind of like being so kind of like blown away and kind of super impressed, if that's kind of an emotion. This is why I kind of say, well, I don't know if this one really counts. By the ending of that film, now, I'm not going to spoil the ending if you haven't seen Evil Dead 2, but I thought it was so incredibly clever. I remember I was just blown away and so kind of like impressed. And I felt like I'd just discovered, because it was, you know, a lesser known film to a certain degree. I mean, bear in mind, this is before social media, before DVDs and stuff. This was VHS days. That, you know, it kind of just blew me away, and kind of thought, wow, you can get this kind of like clever storytelling in a low budget film. And I was just kind of like, wow, you know, it changed my perspective, and it got me more interested in the horror movies and kind of lower budget films, because up to that point I'd really only watched higher budget films. And it was this movie, Evil Dead 2, that kind of opened my eyes to the possibility of watching, you know, the non-mainstream, to be honest. Even though you could argue the Evil Dead series is somewhat mainstream, it led me down the path of watching kind of lots of B movies. So Evil Dead 2. The next one I talk about is an even earlier movie, and that is Star Wars. And when I say Star Wars, most people will know it as A New Hope, but I just call it Star Wars, because when it was released, that's what it was called. So the original Star Wars movie, I remember I saw this when I was very young. It's actually my earliest memory watching Star Wars, and it just blew me away with this kind of sense of wonderment and you know, this alien world, and, you know, spaceships and things like that, and just that kind of like that real sense of wonder that I got from that. And it was also my first kind of crush. Now, I was very young and didn't really kind of understand about all that kind of stuff, but Princess Leia, you know, all the people, everyone at school was kind of like Princess Leia and things like this. So I kind of had my first kind of crush on kind of the Star Wars Princess Leia, especially with her, you know, her white buns and stuff, white dress and buns and all that. But yeah, so those two things really, I would suggest make it count as having a movie which has some emotional resonance. Now, admittedly, with Star Wars, my appreciation for the franchise has dissipated over the years, where I think it's been milked and bastardized into just a commercial crap, you know, but there you go. But the original Star Wars, certainly for that time in my life, was, you know, very kind of a personal film to some ways. Then the next three, I would say, up the ante a little bit with genuine kind of emotions. So the next one is Eden Lake. And that might be an odd choice. This is a horror film that stars Michael Fassbender. And I would say this movie elicited genuine fear from me. Now, doing a movie doing a YouTube channel which focuses a lot on horror movies, I often get asked, what is the scariest movie for me? And my answer is Eden Lake, which is nothing fancy. It's basically a couple facing off against a group of hooligans, or criminal youth, if you like. But what made this movie so raw was because it's so true to life about certain aspects of society. The disregard for life, the kind of like the, just the kind of like that not caring kind of attitude and things like this. And then the ending, again, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but the very, very ending of the movie about what people would do going down an even darker path just so they didn't get in trouble. Oh, I mean, it was harrowing. I found this movie harrowing. Because we see people like our antagonists on the streets of our society. So it's not a stretch of the imagination to really kind of, imagine yourself in that situation. So I found this movie quite kind of scary and quite disturbing in some ways. You may be thinking, surely like Schindler's List or something is, is kind of more harrowing than that. And in a way, yes, but I wasn't alive in World War II. This kind of I see every day in regards to the people who are on the streets near where I work and things like that. So it's kind of, it has that more of an emotional resonance with me. So that is Eden Lake. And the next two films are less about the films themselves and more about how it makes me feel about my personal life outside of it. So the next one is Tarzan the Ape Man, and this is obviously an old film now, starring Johnny Weissmuller. And to be honest with you, I don't know if it was specifically this Tarzan film. There was a lot of them that came out in this ilk, but this reminds me of my grandparents who have passed away. I passed away when I was relatively young, and it's one of these things that reminds me of my grandparents. And I don't have a lot of memories of when I was very young. I can't remember much about my childhood, to be honest. But one of the things I do remember is watching these Tarzan films with my grandfather. So, I reviewed Tarzan the Ape Man some years ago, and it was just like, wow, it just takes me back to like these childhood memories and childhood feelings of watching that film. And I knew that like my grandparents were really into the kind of like the Tarzan movies, the kind of like the old kind of like Universal monster movies and those black and white films. So watching Tarzan, I don't know, it just made me think about my grandparents and thinking back. It kind of reminds me of the feelings I had back then and memories and stuff like that. So yeah, it was like a real warm feeling whilst kind of watching these movies. And at some point I'd like to go and kind of watch the kind of the series going forward. It's just to get in the time to do that. So yeah, that's kind of like a great and a nice feeling. And the last film I'll talk about, and this one is a little hard for me, if I'm honest. God, you know what? I'm really not good at talking about my feelings, and this is a hard one to talk about because it's kind of like very personal. But we're talking about the movie Frequency from I believe the year 2000. And this one stars Dennis Quaid and Jim Caviezel. And it's effectively about an adult guy played by Jim Caviezel who manages to talk to his father who has died when he was a child. His old man was a fireman through this kind of like a solar storm, which has enabled him to talk to radio for his father in the past. So it's this kind of father-son relationship. And for me personally, I won't go into too much detail, but, obviously, clearly I have a biological father, but I haven't seen my father or any of his side of the family since I was around 5 or 6 years old. So, watching a film, like a genre film, where a father and son relationship is so prominent on it, really hits me, because it's almost like it's a relationship I have never really had. I've never really had a father and son relationship because I simply didn't have a father, you know, in a kind of any real kind of sense. So watching this movie and seeing this relationship between the father and son, it really hits me. This kind of film where it has that strong kind of like relationship between, you know, these two men, a father and son relationship, it kind of fills me with a sense of longing for something I've never had. But yeah, so that's the 5 films that I remember have just elicited an emotional response from me that I still remember to this day. I'm sure there's other films that I have seen which has given me a kind of like an emotional response, but I just haven't, you know, they haven't kind of, I haven't remembered it, or that it's just kind of faded and stuff. But I watch films these days, you know, that I just watch them because I enjoy them. It's not because I necessarily collect, but there are certain ones that really kind of have, you know, have that sticking point to me for one reason or another. And I'd be curious if there's any other any films for you guys that kind of just have this kind of like emotional resonance, either because of something in the film directly or because it kind of like plays into something in your life, like I've kind of demonstrated there. Please do let me know, and I'll look forward to kind of, you know, seeing what you guys say. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I shall see you next time. Bye for now.